Have you heard the expression, when it rains, it pours? And when you hear someone say this, it pretty much means their bad day just got a little worse. Today, we're here to talk about protecting Lake Michigan and the world of water that surrounds us. And when it rains, it does pour. And this can mean a bad day for Lake Michigan, because when it rains, it pours pollution into our Lake Michigan watershed. Wait, what's a watershed? And what is pollution? And how does rain pour pollution into the lake? Let's explore these questions together. Then we can discover what each one of us can do to help protect Lake Michigan. This is When It Rains, It Pours. Our planet is the big blue planet, mostly covered in water. Water is essential to humans and to all other animals, to plants, to all living things. And water is found in many places on Earth and in many different forms. Rain is one of those. Rain plays an important role in our environment and in our lives. Rain helps deliver water all across our planet. Most of our planet's water is in the oceans, and the water in the oceans is salt water. In fact, 97% of Earth's water is salt water. But we are fortunate, located right here in Northwest Indiana is Lake Michigan, one of the 5 Great Lakes. A source of fresh water, a vital natural resource, and our very own local natural resource. A natural resource is something of the Earth's that we can use. The Great Lakes contain 21% of Earth's fresh water. That's 1/5 of all the planet's fresh water, and it can be found in the Great Lakes. But remember, with most of Earth's water located in the oceans to begin with, 1/5 of what's left doesn't leave us much to work with. What happens to rain after it lands on Earth's surface is important if we're going to explore ways to protect Lake Michigan. One thing we know for sure about rain, we don't want to get stuck in it. But many things that fall to the earth do get stuck and swept away. In the rain, what happens to rain after it lands on the Earth's surface is important if we're going to explore ways to protect Lake Michigan. When a steady rain falls on vegetated areas, that's where the plants are, like fields, lawns, gardens, and in the forests, the rain is absorbed into the soil where it becomes groundwater. Thunderstorms that last for a long time bring heavy rains and produce more water than the ground can absorb. This causes rainwater to flow over the ground and become runoff. The runoff is particles, materials or substances that flow into lakes, rivers, ditches, and wetlands with each rainfall or each snowmelt. And rain that falls on hard surfaces like buildings, roads, parking lots, and playgrounds also flows off of these surfaces because they also don't absorb water. Rain flowing off hard surfaces is also called runoff. And runoff is also known as stormwater runoff because it happens during a rain event or storm. With each rain, there's a chance that harmful pollutants can enter Lake Michigan. Pollution is something that can be found in air, soil, and water and is usually harmful and most often is caused by humans. And so the stormwater runoff will keep on flowing in search of a lower place, flowing over land, into a ditch, into a creek, even into man-made underground pipes known as stormwater sewers. The runoff can form puddles in low spots or cause water to puddle in the streets. If the runoff ends up in a pond or lake, it will cause that water to rise. As the pond begins to spill over its shores, the runoff and the pollution it carries continue on their journey. Where we live in Northwest Indiana, that lowest point is Lake Michigan, and our runoff flows into Lake Michigan through its web of streams and ditches and rivers, ponds and lakes known as the Lake Michigan watershed. A watershed is the area of land from which water flows to a river, lake, or other body of water. It's a drainage network, like a natural funnel of ditches and creeks, streams and rivers, where the stormwater runoff acts like your school bus. But this bus isn't picking up students. This water, acting like a bus, is picking up pollution passengers all along its way. So, who are these pollution passengers anyway? What kinds of pollution will mix with the runoff? What kinds of things are traveling as the extra water flows? Are these different pollutants that are catching a ride? Sometimes we can trace pollution back to its source or point to where it came from. We call this type of pollution point source pollution. Remember that factory we just saw pouring toxic sludge into the river? We definitely know where that pollution came from. But what about all this litter from people? The oil and gas from our cars on the road surface that made their way into a ditch and then traveled with the rainwater, eventually ending up in Lake Michigan? All of these homes here in this neighborhood were using the same type of poison to kill weeds. So once this weed-killing chemical makes its way to Lake Michigan, how would we know for sure exactly where it came from? Sometimes the source of the pollution is a mystery. This type of pollution has a different name. It's called Nonpoint source pollution because we can't trace it back to its source. When it rains, it pours, and it pours pollution into the Lake Michigan watershed. Not only does this mean Lake Michigan's day, week, month, year, or decades just got a lot worse, but the pollution in the runoff was causing damage all along its journey. The fertilizers that washed from gardens, lawns, and farmlands caused the plants in the ponds to grow too. This extra overgrowth of plants in the water upsets the balance as the plants are growing bigger and faster than they would naturally. Now they are using up the oxygen in the wetland, stealing it from other plants and animals that need it to live. The weed killers and bug sprays that washed away are now working overtime, killing other plants and insects, not just the ones you were targeting in the garden. And these chemicals are poisoning the fish and other animals in the places where the runoff flows, creating a dangerous and toxic environment for all the living things. When the rainwater arrived, the runoff picked up germs and bacteria from these things and traveled to Lake Michigan, which spread illness to the people and animals. The harmful chemicals used to clean the car and the car's oil that was carelessly dumped on the ground can also kill plants, insects, fish, or make animals like rabbits sick. People can become sick too. That loose soil from the construction site and driveway were picked up by the runoff and carried away too, but they didn't quite make it all the way to Lake Michigan. They ended up settling at the bottom of this creek on the way to the lake, blocking light for plants that these animals eat to survive. But each time it rains, it doesn't have to mean a bad day for Lake Michigan or its watershed. Non-point source pollution, it began with us. And now protecting Lake Michigan can begin with us. And you can start now. This means taking a pledge to become an environmental steward. The word steward describes a person who has the job of taking care of something. Your pledge to be an environmental steward is your promise to care for the earth, our environment, and it starts here with Lake Michigan. As an environmental steward, you can lead your family toward making better choices and taking environmental responsibility. There are things you and your family can do. We call them simple steps. Here are some simple steps you can take. First things first, never dump anything into a storm drain, ditch, or waterway. Second step, always dispose of trash in a covered container. And be sure to recycle whenever you can. Third step, have a serious chat with those grown-ups at home. Encourage them to avoid using harmful fertilizers, weed killers, insecticides, and pesticides on the lawn and in the garden. Step 4, you can take charge with your family and plan to plant native trees, plants, and flowers. These are the kinds of plants that belong here. They've always grown here. They're the types that grow best here in Northwest Indiana and won't need extra chemicals to keep them growing or keep them bug-free. Step 5. Have you ever heard of a rain garden? It works to collect runoff, and you can even use native plants to create one. Step 6 is to install a rain barrel. A rain barrel captures rainwater from your home's gutters and keeps it from escaping from your yard as runoff and picking up pollution passengers along the way. Captured rain can then be reused to water your grass, garden, plants, and flowers. And in step 7, everybody poops. So when the dog does it, clean it up, and right away. And that does belong in the trash. Reuse a waterproof bag like a plastic newspaper sleeve. Wrap it and trap it. And lastly, remember your pledge as an environmental steward. Protecting Lake Michigan's water quality starts with you.